Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Healing with your host, Dr. Judy Jasek of Animal Healing Arts and Matt Rowe of ParsleyPet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and alternative treatments for cancer, unexplained illnesses, and supporting your pet's natural ability to heal. Welcome, Dr. Judy, to this week's show.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here as always.
As always, this is so much fun. I look forward to this every week. So this week we're talking about, will feeding my dog grains prevent DCM, dilated cardiomyopathy? And unless you've been under a rock for the past, year, this is a term that is very familiar to you. You've heard it at vets, you've heard it talked about in so many areas that really the advice, and Dr. Judy, you were talking about this in the pre-show, is that a lot of conventional vets are saying, and a lot of individuals are saying, that feeding grain actually keeps DCM from affecting your animal or preventing it and that type of stuff. Is that true?
That's what I'm hearing. And, it's one of those things, Matt, that just baffles me. Like how, if you just even think about this logically, so the one thing that has been linked to DCM or dilated cardiomyopathy is low taurine. So that's one thing that we have found that can cause heart disease in both dogs and cats. And grains are not a source of taurine. So one of the other things that cardiologists will do is put pets on taurine supplements and say that they need to eat grain. And the way this all got started was that they started seeing more and more dogs, were being diagnosed with the DCM. And a lot of them were eating what they call boutique foods. So these are foods that would be bought at, say, a natural pet food store. And a lot of them are grain-free. And so this correlation was made without any proof. Just a correlation was made between the grain-free diets and the DCM. And if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. So they're saying that feeding grain is preventing DCM from developing in a pet, which it isn't true. There's nothing in the grain. Grain is also, as we've talked about on the show already, grain is not healthy for dogs and cats. And yeah. I believe that the issue is in these other diets. So the diets that don't have grains still have things like lentils and beans and peas and all of these other ingredients that are inflammatory to the GI tract. I have heard some theories where they can actually bind to taurine and prevent its being absorbed properly. As we've also talked about, a lot of these products are sprayed with glyphosate. And I actually did listen to a webinar a month or so ago that talked about how glyphosate can also interfere with taurine absorption. So there's many different things going on in these diets that right. could be contributing to the heart condition, and they're all inflammatory, whether, all kibble is inflammatory. We've talked about that because of the high carbohydrate load, whether it's grain or potato or lentils or beans or peas or whatever they're putting in there for right. fillers, it's all inflammatory. And that's probably also contributing. And I look at my very first thought when I started hearing this is like, well, just feed raw, because what's the best source of taurine? Fresh right. meat and fresh organ meats. That's your taurine source right there. That's where, Mother Nature is putting it out there in abundance for us. And this whole debate about grain-free or not grain-free, it's like, just feed raw and we're in good shape. To me, it's a no-brainer, but I have a client come in that says, oh, well, I was told I have to feed grain. It's like, it's so frustrating to hear that, because then clients get so confused because they get all this conflicting information.
Right.
We got one vet telling them, oh, you got to feed grain or your dog's going to get heart disease. And I'm saying, no, just feed, fresh meat and right. your pet your pet is going to be fine. So
Yeah.
I understand that it's confusing, but if you just think about it logically, does feeding grain sound healthy for a dog's heart? Doesn't to me.
No, I don't think so as well. And you brought up some great points, the amount of inflammation, but you said something early on, is that causation and correlation. So they basically saw that these grain-free diets that were coming out in abundance as a fad, and they started to take a look at those pieces. And so they immediately correlated the DCM spike with the advent of these non-grain based diets, and they said, oh, that's a reason. But like you said, I mean, you take a look at lentils and garbanzo beans, just case in point, and that's what they're putting in the grain free, has the highest level of glyphosate spread. When you talk to Larry Bolin over at HRI Labs, who is really the leader in a lot of the glyphosate research that's out there now. And so when you're seeing glyphosate potentially be a blocker for absorption of taurine in the system, so you're looking at, it's not just that it's grain free, it's the type of product that they're making grain free dog food with. That could be
Mhm.
the correlation in regards to this. But like you said, it's really easy to fix raw. Just feed raw.
Yeah.
Organ meat being the key part of taurine. And once we remove that out of a diet with a kibble based diet, yeah, your dog, and then we limit, even on a minor amount, to limit the absorption rate of taurine in the system. Well, of course, your dog is going to have issues with DCM, that this could potentially come up for them.
Yeah. And, I've actually seen dogs that have come into me with heart murmurs. So, not necessarily diagnosed with DCM specifically, but they come
Sure.
in with a heart murmur that you can hear, and they're eating a kibble diet, and we get them on raw. And I have seen those murmurs diminish. And in a couple of
Mm,
cases, I've seen them actually disappear. So, I know this
yep.
nutrition is really good for the heart. I mean, I've seen it
Right.
in my own practice. And so to
Mhm.
me, this is just a no-brainer. And when whenever I hear something like this, like, okay, this just doesn't make any sense, then my next thought is, okay, follow the money, right? Who's
Yeah.
putting this? Who has something to gain by putting this propaganda out there? Well, it's
Right.
the grain-based foods. And who are those? The big prescription diet companies, the
Mhm.
Hills and Royal Canin and Purina and all these diets that are, the
Right.
big names out there now, both on the prescription and non-prescription side. And by the way,
Mhm.
there's nothing prescription in a prescription diet. It's just
True.
they just put a prescription label on it and charge a whole lot more money for it, and they
Right.
only allow vets to sell them. There's nothing special about those foods. Look at the ingredients; they're pretty much the same as your average grocery
Yeah.
store food. It's all a big the whole prescription diet industry, in my opinion, is just a big marketing scam and putting a lot of very unhealthy diets out there for
Mhm.
pets.
Right.
So yeah, just feed the fresh food diet. That is the
Mhm.
best way to support not only the heart, but your pet's whole body. We're going to be reducing inflammation. I spoke with a client of mine this morning. I just did a follow-up call, and I talked to her 2 weeks ago, and we are doing a diet transition onto a fresh food diet.
Mhm.
And in 2 weeks, she was just completely amazed. The dog had this like really dry, crusty nose. It had ear issues, was itchy, had diarrhea. And in 2 weeks, the dog's done almost a complete 180. Just
Crazy.
amazingly improved. And this is just in 2 weeks. I mean, the dog's just barely getting adapted to the new diet. So imagine how
Yeah.
great it's going to feel once it's been on actual good nutrition
Mhm.
for some time. So I see that and like, I don't need any other evidence than cases like that feeding
Yeah.
fresh food is the best thing for your pets. And a lot of this, the propaganda out there is just about these companies selling more food and pushing their agenda, and they have the marketing budget to do it. And that's
Mhm.
sadly what it comes down to in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Where it's almost like they're trying to pull the wool down over so many eyes in regards to it. And so, and they're getting us used to dogs being sick at the age of 10 or dying at a young age, when dogs should not be sick this early. I mean, you were showing cases of cancer in dogs. I think you had shared a story early on when we were doing this, that at 18 months you saw a dog with
Yeah.
cancer. And
Yeah.
that is crazy to me that these big food companies are taking a look at it. And so they're more interested in lining their pockets, I believe, instead of actually looking at the health of what a dog really should have and the bioavailability nature of a raw, fed dog and the raw meal that we feed our dogs. That's what their bodies are meant to digest. That's what genetically and that's ancestrally what that they were raised to do. I mean, a dog is not going to go whip up a kibble in if it was wild. No, it's going to get a rabbit if it was wild.
It's not there munching out in the cornfields. It's
Mm-hmm.
chasing the rabbits and the rodents and the little
Right.
critters, that are out there munching on the corn, but the dogs are not out there eating the grains. Yeah. And I think it's also important for people to realize that these big mega corporations that own the food companies also own the corporate veterinary clinics that sell them. So there's no division there. It's all like one big, like a couple big corporations that own a large share of the veterinary profession. And these agendas are being pushed by people sitting in an office looking at the bottom line, and they're not thinking about pet health. They are looking at profitability. And it's very sad, but I hear more and more bizarre things coming out of the mouths of veterinarians these days that I just can't believe that a trained medical professional could come up with these conclusions or go along with this propaganda when it doesn't even make any kind of logical sense at all.
Right. Absolutely. So I think for the show today, I think the number one thing we want everybody to walk away with is logic. Is take a look at the logic of why and follow the threads. It doesn't take much research at all. It doesn't even take looking on Google for more than 10 minutes to realize which companies are pushing this and where you can actually start improving the health. So go into your own logic side. You don't need to be a trained medical professional. You don't need to have researched this for hundreds of years. You really just take a look at it and say, does this seem right? What would my dog eat?
And ask questions. Like, when your veterinarian says something like, well, you need to feed grain, to prevent heart disease, ask, well, where did that information come from? Like, what is it about the grain that's preventing the heart disease? And a lot of times that they won't be able to answer that question. Well, because there is no good answer to that question. Right. But what happens is the propaganda gets put out, and it's like in many other, areas of our lives, when something is said over and over and over enough times, it becomes truth, even if it's not true. People hear something enough and then they begin to believe it. And people, I understand, want to do the best for their pets. And of course, that's what we want too. And I see pets getting sicker and sicker and sicker on these kibble diets. And it's tragic. And when something like this comes out that specifically says, oh, well, you have to feed grain to prevent this particular type of disease, where I know nutritionally that what the pet really needs is a fresh food diet.
Yep. So well said. We're going to leave it at that. That is beautifully articulated. Thank you very much, Dr. Judy. So what is the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
Well, my practice name is Animal Healing Arts. My website is ahavet.com, and our email is info@ahavet.com. Our phone number is 720-515-2421.
And I highly recommend Dr. Judy will do virtual appointments and really that telemedicine approach. And so if no matter where you are in the country, definitely engage with Dr. Judy, spend 30 minutes with her and have a conversation about your dog. And this is the most important thing, is you'll get more time with Dr. Judy than you ever would with your conventional vet when you go into the office, because they're seeing so many patients. They may have 5-10 minutes with you. You can spend time with Dr. Judy and actually
and you can actually come in and see me. You don't have to hand your pet over at the curb.
Right.
You actually get to come in. We can have a face-to-face conversation.
And it's priceless. Like to have that type of knowing and understanding and that peace of mind is you can't put a number on that. You can't even say how that is going to feel, because when you leave and you have that pride, yes, I'm doing everything for my best friend that can't speak. So
Right.
you can always reach out to us at ParsleyPet.com and just go to ParsleyPet.com. And with that, you take a look at the nutritional blueprint. This is going to test 48 different nutrients inside your dog's body, so you know specifically if you're feeding your dog the right food or not, and what's the best way to keep them in this state of ideal health. So thank you, Dr. Judy, for being on the show today. So
Oh,
appreciate you.
always a pleasure, Matt. I love doing
Yep.
these shows as well.
Yep. Oh, awesome. Thank you. All right, everybody, have a great day today. Enjoy
Bye.
and have fun finding your raw food if you don't feed it.